Hello, I'm Mike, founder of Starlit Contracts, where we help you to negotiate and use contracts with confidence. This video is part of our Build the Foundation in Contracts program, and our topic is liquidated damages and penalties. We have another really important topic for this video when we're looking at liquidated damages, sometimes just called LDs, and penalties. So firstly, what is it? Well, liquidated damages and penalties, they're a form of compensation that it's often a supplier paying to a customer in certain events. So for example, it could be that I as the supplier commit to deliver a product by a certain date and the delivery is late. Then I might pay you liquidated damages or penalties. Alternatively, I might say to you, this product is going to perform at a certain level, and if it doesn't, then in that case, I may also pay to you liquidated damages or penalties. How does it work in practice? Well, the value of compensation for liquidated damages and for penalties tend to be predetermined and inserted in the contract. With liquidated damages, they tend to accumulate on a daily, weekly or monthly basis, and the value of the liquidated damages is often a percentage of the value of the product that is in question. This contrasts with penalties, which will often require a lump sum payment. Is this something that you should care about? Well, liquidated damages and penalties can be very helpful in avoiding the escalation of disputes later, because if there is a breach of contract because a product was delivered late or the product does not perform at the level that I committed to as the supplier, then the remedy is clearly identified and the parties can just continue to perform the rest of the deal without having a dispute hanging over their heads. But beware to calculate penalties and liquidated damages very carefully when you're a supplier, because it can change a good deal into an unprofitable deal very quickly. So you might want to make sure that you're inserting some risk contingency into your pricing. Finally, keep in mind that some governing laws do not permit penalties clauses, so in those instances you'll want to use liquidated damages instead. Let's look at a practical example together now. Speedy Supply commits to deliver a product on the 1st of January. Quick Resale customer plans to resell the product soon afterwards. They agreed that Supply will pay LDs, liquidated damages, of 5% of the product's price for every week of delay as customers sought an exclusive remedy. Delivery was late and customer needs to find another buyer. What could go right for the parties in this situation? Well, let's say there is a delay of a couple of weeks. Now, the parties have clearly set out in the contract that the supplier would have to pay delay liquidated damages of 5% of the value of the product per week. So let's say they clearly identify the delay, it's clear that it's the responsibility of the supplier, and so the supplier pays to the customer 10% of the contract price. That matter is now finalized. The payment is made and the customer is not able to make any other claims for compensation. They can continue to work together, hopefully on a good basis, and do more business. What could go wrong for the supplier in this situation? Well, let's say that the supplier didn't incorporate any contingency into their price. Well, that would mean if they had to pay this 10% of the contract price to the customer due to the delay, that could mean that the deal very quickly goes from being a profitable deal for the supplier to being an unprofitable one. We'll look at a sample clause and some key considerations now, and firstly to the clause itself. Supplier warrants that it will deliver product to customer at a certain place at a certain time. Supplier will pay liquidated damages with a value equal to 1% of the contract price for every week of delay for which it is responsible, up to a cap of 10% of the contract price. Our first point to note is that the parties will want to identify very clearly in the contract in what circumstances the supplier is under an obligation to pay liquidated damages in case of a delay. So in the first paragraph, we identify that the delivery of a product must be at a place at a certain time. But notice the second paragraph, which makes clear that the obligation to pay liquidated damages will only apply in circumstances that the supplier is responsible for that delay. So if the customer is responsible for the delay, then based on the drafting here, we would say that the supplier is not under an obligation to pay liquidated damages. There would also be a question that if there's a third party, perhaps a third party who's not connected with the contract, is responsible for causing the delay, then in those circumstances, who would be responsible to pay liquidated damages? That's not clear from this example. Our second consideration is to look at what are the consequences in case liquidated damages do in fact apply. So in this case, you can see that the value of liquidated damages is 1% of the contract price. Now, you don't necessarily need to refer to the contract price. The parties may instead refer to the value of the equipment that is in fact delayed. And of course, it doesn't need to be 1% of that value. It could be any other percentage that the parties might agree. We can also look at the accumulation rate of the liquidated damages, because it could be that 1% of the contract price accumulates on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Finally, the parties will want to consider whether to have a cap on liability for liquidated damages. From a supplier perspective, that would be the norm, and you can see that we talk about 10% of the contract price here. From a customer perspective, higher is obviously going to be preferable. And the clause continues, liquidated damages are the sole and exclusive remedy for a delay. The parties agree that the value of liquidated damages above is a genuine pre-estimate of customer's loss. It's a very common requirement that liquidated damages must be a genuine pre-estimate of the losses that the customer would incur due to the delay event, or if there's a shortfall in performance. This is also a requirement under several governing laws. This contrasts with penalties, because as the word suggests, the value of a penalty can be to penalise the defaulting party, so this is not linked to the losses that the customer has in fact incurred. If you're uncertain whether the governing law that applies in your contract allows penalties or not, then it's generally safer just to adopt a liquidated damages regime. I hope that this introductory content is helpful for you, but if you're ready to use a law firm or to hire a lawyer, then go to our website starlitcontracts.com, where we will help you to find the lawyer that you need to address your requirements. See you there.